Hi, everybody. Stephen Vantassel here, wildlife control consultant with another episode of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. And today we have a guest with us. Her name is Kim Cabrera. Welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I've met Kim years ago through the internet, but definitely dating me now in terms of my age. So she was kind enough to let me use some of her images in one of the books that I was writing. So she is a specialist in tracking and animal identification out in the field. So welcome. Tell us a little about yourself. How'd you get involved in this?
Oh gosh, tracking I started a long time ago. I first started tracking when my dad showed me tracks when I was a little kid. I just got fascinated by this thing that you could identify animals by these signs on the ground, and as a little kid I just found that absolutely fascinating, and I think it's something that just carried forward for years and years, and I caught the bug. I caught the tracking bug, and just never let go. I kept on going, and I started out back in the 80s just learning the tracks, and the first thing to do really was to draw them and start to get the shapes settled in my mind, because by drawing you get those details in your head and start to become better at shape recognition. So I started drawing them, and then I went to a tracking course that they offered back in New Jersey back in 1989.
Was that Brown? Was that Tom
Brown? Yeah, I went to a Tom Brown class.
Wow. Okay.
Back in 89, and that was pretty fun. And so I was even more excited about tracking then. I thought, wow, this is cool. And so around around the time the internet was born, basically in the 90s,
right.
I started finding trackers online. And I thought, wow, this is cool. We can connect all these trackers and learn from each other. And in 1998, we founded the International Society of Professional Trackers. And it was a group that brought together trackers from not only the wildlife fields, but search and rescue, law enforcement, military, every aspect of using tracking that you could think of, people used it. And we're part of this group. And so we had conferences and things, and that was fantastic, because I had no idea that there was this entire world out there where people used tracking so much. So that was a great learning experience. And through that, I met a man named Louis Liebenberg, and he's from South Africa. And what he did is he designed a program for, at the time it was the Palm Pilot, the little
device. Yeah, I owned one. Yeah.
It incorporated a GPS. It fit in your hand.
Wow.
Had a GPS with it, and it allowed trackers to enter data. And what he worked up for this device was a computer program called CyberTracker. And the software allowed a tracker who couldn't read and write English to submit wildlife data, and the GPS would automatically record the location. But he designed this software so that it was icon based. And so he got involved with the trackers in South Africa, who are some of the best trackers in the world. And he taught them how to use this device, and they were submitting data that was just unbelievable. They could count how many impalas they saw, and what they were doing, what they were feeding on, what their activities were during certain parts of the day, and the GPS would track these. So they came up with hundreds of thousands of data points just using this software, and it was pretty amazing just for conservation purposes, the amount of data that could be recorded by trackers that were trained in this. And so out of all that became a new program called CyberTracker Conservation, where they offer certification for trackers in wildlife tracking. And the idea with this originally was, in South Africa, you have all these trackers who are the best in the world. These guys are just phenomenal trackers, but they need jobs because their traditional way of life is, going away as all the wildlife in South Africa is now on preserves and private game reserves. So the trackers needed jobs, and they had this tremendous skill set that needed to be shared with the world, pretty much. And so the certification was developed using CyberTracker to certify trackers on their skill levels. So there's four different levels that you could be certified at, and it's modeled after the beginner, the journeyman, the expert, the master tracker. There's four levels. They don't call them that, but there are four levels of certification.
Mm-hmm.
And so that system was in use in South Africa with the trackers over there. And then in 2005, it was brought over to the US by a tracker named Mark Elbrock.
Right,
And
Elbrock.
if you've seen any of the tracking literature that's been written in the last couple decades, his name's on it.
He's amazing.
He's like the most amazing tracker in the whole US. The guy's got a number of publications, and he's really brought tracking into the new century. He's got highly detailed drawings. He's got amazing amounts of data that he's gathered on track and sign of all the wildlife that can be found here on this continent.
Right.
So,
yeah, I own his, and I just want to pause here. I recommend anyone in the audience, anything written by Elbrock is worth purchasing. So I don't make any money on it. I wish I did. But Elbrock, that's spelled Elbroch, Mark Elbrock. Anything by him is worth it. So look him up. Very, very worth it. So he brought the CyberTracker system over here. And in 2006, we had a conference. International Society of Professional Trackers had a conference here where I am in Redway, California. And he brought some of those trackers over from South Africa, and they took us out in the field and they showed us how they do trailing, how they follow the deer through the woods, and they were pretty amazing. They would just look at a trail and say, oh, that's an old one. I can't follow, it's too old. I can't follow that one. Or they would look at this one and say, oh, we can catch up to this one, So they would start trailing this animal with the hope that they could catch up to it. Right.
So that's the other aspect of tracking is there's the whole trailing aspect. You can follow an animal, its trail, long enough to catch up to the animal. And what they're doing is they're recognizing in the tracks whether this trail is fresh enough to follow. And so if you find a trail that's too old, you're not going to bother following it. There's no point. You're not going to catch up to the animal. Right. But they're through trailing skills, they're able to determine, hey, this one's smoking hot fresh. I'm going to follow this one. And so they start following that trail. And the idea is not to catch up to the animal and have it see you and run off. They want to catch up to the animal so you could observe it and then be able to retreat without it knowing that you're there.
Oh, so that's very hard. Yeah, that's a different level. Yeah, that's a high level.
Yeah, very high level of skill and a lot of practice and a lot of time. And that's kind of the epitome that most of the trackers are shooting for now, is to get good enough to be able to do that.
So what do they do? Take a picture to kind of prove that they were there, or is that too cumbersome to carry with you in the field?
You can bring a camera. So, in South Africa, they have a big tourism business where the tourists want to see the big five over there. Yeah. And so over there, of course, there's the tourist industry. And here, there really isn't that application yet. But, at some point, maybe there will be. And so you can get close enough to see the animal, take a picture of it. It's great for people who are photographers, even hunters, and to get close to the animals and be able to see it, confirm what you're following. So there's that aspect. There's also the certification for this, and right now there's no practical use for the certification in the U.S. because we don't have a big tourist industry that relies on finding animals and showing them to people. But hopefully that will change at some point.
Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, I think that sometimes people want the certification for sort of an internal, just a check to make sure that what they're as good as they think they are in an objective sense. They have someone judging them. But I would like you to talk about, you've obviously had, decades of experience here in tracking. And so if you were talking to a beginner, what would be the skill set that you would tell them to try to focus on? How would they start this they want to break into this, because one of the challenges we have in the urban environment
Mm.
is concrete
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
asphalt and impacted soil. But nevertheless, I do think there are situations where knowing tracks can be helpful, because it helps you observe other
Mm.
things. And so could you explore that a little bit?
Okay. Yeah, I think now I was raised in the suburbs, so I know
Yeah.
how hard it can be to find any track or sign there. And
Right.
you know, you're lucky if you find a raccoon muddy paw print on a wall or something, or on your garbage cans, and in that environment. So it can be done. There are also signs that wildlife leave that are not just tracks. So another aspect of tracking is sign. So that could be, anything from the little smudges that rats leave at the entrance to their holes, to scats. And these scats, feathers, nests, burrows, any sign that an animal has been there is something that's within the scope of what a tracker should learn or should know how to identify.
Right.
And so that's what makes the cyber tracker evaluations a little exciting, is you can pretty much bet that they will find something you won't know.
Yeah. So how would you start someone on this path if they were like, look, I'm a city boy or a city lady, and what would you start them out at? How would you begin that process?
The first thing that I would do would be get a good resource. So have a book that is dependable, that, one of Elbrock's books is my go-to. There's a couple others out there, Jim Halfpenny and Lowry.
I took a course with him.
Yeah, James Lowry has a book that's got really good detail.
And what was the last one? Lowry, you said?
Lowry, James Lowry. Lowry.
Okay.
And he has a book also called The Tracker's Handbook that's excellent. Paul Resendez has a book that's, it's not out of print, but he's not actively teaching anymore, but still his book's out there and it's good too. So get a resource first to start with, so that you have something to look up what you find. And then just go out and find wild or semi-wild areas wherever you can. Now, when I was a kid in the suburbs, I used to go to a creek drainage that was near me and find frogs and find animal tracks on the banks of the creek. And I know that's kind of hard with the channelized concrete creeks, because we have those too. And the channelized creeks, there's often sediment in them, and that sediment will hold tracks also. In urban environments, you can find burrows in lawns and garden areas. So look for things like that, any sign of an animal, a wild animal. And scats, of course, are going to be probably one of the biggest ones that you're going to find, because they can't really hide those in the urban environment. And start to learn the ones that are around you. Also look at what animals should be found in your area. So go on your State Department of Fish and Wildlife's website for accurate lists of mammals and birds that should be found in your location. And oftentimes, especially with birds, they're broken down by season, because many of the birds are migratory and won't be there all year. So look for lists of what animals you would expect to be there. Certainly you won't expect to find wolves in Southern California, things like that. So, to use an extreme example.
Yeah.
So start out with things like that. Learn the animals that should be in your area, and then learn what the tracks and sign that those animals make looks like. By studying, you can study videos on YouTube. You can study the books. Go to my website if you want, BearTracker.com, and it's bear-tracker.com. And I've got a collection of tracks and sign there. So study what animals may be in your area and learn what their tracks and sign looks like. And also, as you're studying these animals, learn a little bit about the biology of the species. So if you're studying foxes, you might find out that foxes like to overmark things with their scat. And so that would be a behavioral thing that you could look for in the field, and you will find fox scat deposited on top of objects. And and that's a behavioral thing. Or raccoons and their penchant for getting into water and getting into garbage cans. So whether the animal is nocturnal or whether it will be crepuscular, dawn and dusk, if it's active during the dawn and dusk hours. So learn as much as you can about the biology of the animal, because that will help you also knowing what to expect, what sort of signs it may leave. Does it do scent marking? Because a lot of animals are very oriented towards scent, and they will do a lot of scent marking activities, and some of those activities will leave tracks and sign behind that you can find and interpret.
Do you think there's any value in creating a track trap?
Track traps are really valuable. Yeah, those are great learning tools. Some trackers will make tracking boxes in their backyards. They'll just make a little sand pit, basically, that animals can walk across. Some people bait them, some people don't. I know one tracker that is used. There's a type of clay that he uses that's really fine that he gets at hardware stores. I forget the name of the clay, bentonite clay or something. It's super fine clay, and he's got bird feeders in the backyard, and he has spread the clay out so that it's got a very thin layer, and then when the animals walk through it, especially the smaller animals, it makes these perfect, beautiful traps.
Really?
And so he's had good results getting images that way. You can also make what's called a Slit Plate, and this is something that scientists have used to search for animals and determine presence or absence. They take what I did is I got an aluminum sheet. It was just an old road sign that basically I found along the river one day, and it was just a flat sheet of aluminum, and then you coat that with some material that will come off on the animal's hand and leave a print. So in my case, what I used was old copier toner, but you can also use construction chalk, because that comes in different colors. And the chalk can be mixed with a little bit of mineral oil. I think it's mineral oil and rubbing alcohol that you mix it with to make it flow, and then you spread it out over the aluminum sheet so that there's a light coating of this material, the chalk. And then you use the sticky contact paper, so preferably the stuff that's just plain white, and you put that over one end of your sheet with the sticky side up, so you have to glue it to your sheet. So here's your sheet, it's flat, you've coated the surface with soot here, and then this surface you want to put your contact paper on sticky side up,
right,
and glue it on there. Then you peel off the backing, and then you have this surface here coated with soot, and then beyond it is your contact paper. Kind of doing this here, but when the animal walks across that soot, it will then walk across the contact paper. It will pick up the soot on its feet. When it goes on the contact paper, it leaves little perfect prints, and they're in black and white. It's like little ink prints.
Yeah.
So
you have a negative print on the soot, but you have a positive print on the contact paper. So you might have two different chances to get a track out of it.
Right. Yeah, because you can lift the one from the soot. If that's a good one, you can use clear packaging tape and just take a strip of it, stick it on there, and lift it, and then place that on a piece of paper.
I tried making one of those once, and I had trouble, I think, with the formulation of trying to get that thin coat. Because when I looked at the literature, they just said, well, use a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And I was like, can you be any more vague than that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, why didn't you have a scientific paper, and you didn't tell me exactly how much alcohol to use versus how much powder? It's just like, oh, it'll work out. And I'm like, well,
There's a good one that was put out by the Forest Service around 1995 called Martin's Fishers and Wolverines Survey Methods for Their Detection.
Okay.
I think it's GTR 157. It's one of the Forest Service publications, and Kusera and Zielinski are the authors.
Okay.
It's available free online as a PDF, and they use soot for theirs, which they got from an acetylene torch, which gives the best results. Because when I use the soot, it gives super fine detail, so you can see the whorls on an opossum foot. They have little whorls like we have on our fingerprints.
Hmm.
They have little whorls on their feet.
Do you
and can
think
see
it
that.
would work? I mean, I don't have access to an acetylene torch. Do you
Yeah,
think
me
it
neither.
would work? Do you think it would work with one of those oil, the old-fashioned oil lamps?
Kerosene is supposed to work too. Yeah, anything
Okay.
that will give a soot coating, candles. I think even those, the little torches that you can get that work with propane, the handheld ones.
Yeah.
I think those will even work.
No kidding.
It'll provide soot on you just want a coating of soot on your aluminum plate,
Oh,
and it's
okay.
really fine. It gives good detail, especially if you're getting rodents. If you want to get the tracks of rodents,
Right. Okay.
small animals, birds.
So talk a little bit about your training. You have you provide training out there in California. Is that correct?
Yeah, I provide training. So locally, I lead walks on tracking and train volunteers at there's a local, kind of a park interpretive association, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a place that's Friends of the Park type of place. And so what I do is I provide training for the docents on how to recognize track and sign, and they're using that to take the public out and lead them on walks, show them what kind of wildlife live in their area. And my background in tracking, I started out, with that one class at Tom Brown, but I went through the CyberTracker program, and CyberTracker is a series of evaluations.
Right.
And so you can take two different, there's a lower band evaluation, which is kind of a standard, and then you can take the upper band evaluation, which will allow you to become certified as a specialist, which is the top level of 4. So there's the beginner, level 1, 2, 3, and then there's specialists. So I earned specialist in the desert biome and in the forest biome. So I have the desert, like in San Diego County, California, and then I earned one up here in northwestern California in the forest environment. And that
Wow.
evaluation process, they asked you, I think it's 70, or let's see, so the specialist one, they ask you 57 questions over the course of 2 days. It's limited to 10 participants because it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And so they ask you a total of 57 questions, and to get specialist, you have to get 100% right. You can earn bonus. You can get 2 wrong, but you have to get 6 bonus questions right in order to wipe out 2 wrong questions.
Oh my God. Well, because I saw a guy online who received his, I think, highest level of certification, and they had him running all over the woods there. It was like 2 days. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is pretty hardcore. So, and I think I think was
intense.
yeah, I think Elbrock was giving him a congratulations or something.
Yeah.
It was 2. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, and you have 2 of those.
I did 2 of them. It was kind of difficult to do.
I would think so. Is there been any? So how do people get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me on my website at BearTracker.com. It's bear-tracker.com. I have a YouTube channel, BearTracker777 on YouTube. Facebook, I have BearTracker Nature Films. And I also run a animal track and sign identification group on Facebook called Animals Don't Cover Their Tracks.
Oh.
And we have, oh gosh, I think we're getting close to 15,000 members now.
Okay.
In that group, people that are interested in tracks and learning about tracks and signs. So
I think I need to join that group. I don't think I'm a member of that.
Yeah, if you find tracks that you're interested in getting identified, you can join the group and have people identify them for you. I also have a CyberTracker Study Buddies group, which is a little more detailed. It look into tracks and signs. So if you're kind of an experienced tracker and you want to get into more detailed questions like, how many toes does this animal have?
Right.
And
Yeah.
is this left or a right track or front or hind? If you want to get into that level of detail, the CyberTracker Study Buddies group is the one for that.
Wow.
So there's a number of places online where you can get help.
Sure. No, that can be very. I may have you re-summarize that list, or probably send me an email so I can include it into our video notes here, so that people can have access. Because there's a lot of information there that someone, if they're driving, may have trouble writing down. Don't stop.
Right.
Don't keep doing it while you're driving. Pull over if you need to. All right. So
yeah, if you're driving,
we don't want any accidents.
Yeah.
So what's next for you now? I mean, you've gotten 2 senior level tracking things. Where do you see is this a career? Is this a hobby? Is this a passion? Where is this at?
It's a hobby and a passion and an obsession, I guess.
Okay.
Trackers, once you catch the tracking bug, you just don't ever turn it off, I guess. It's one of the things that you become just kind of sucked into this whole world of tracking. And I think the next thing I'd like to do is go for trailing specialist. But that requires that you trail the animal, catch up to it, be able to see it, and then leave without it seeing you. So there's I've only gotten as far as level 2 on trailing so far.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, because that's I think that makes it even more physically rigorous because of the amount you have to be in a certain, making sure you're walking correctly, and you have to head in the swivel, so that you have to be very careful of your body presence, and that's definitely a different thing. And
it's a whole different ball game. And I've practiced trailing on old bear trails, but I make so much noise crashing through the brush and trying to be quiet. I don't know that anything's going to stay still long enough.
As we age, I'm feeling my age. It's just harder to move gently.
Yeah, it's really hard to move around in the woods. I mean, it's very much a thing for younger folks.
I definitely think that's but if you have it, you might be able to do it in more open environments. See, Montana, we have some pretty wide open spaces, so you might be able to get away with it out here a little bit easier.
The Pacific Northwest, there's so much vegetation here, and inland in the Pacific Northwest, it's very dry this time of year. And more fire prone, but everything's crispy.
Yeah.
And so you walk around and you just go crunch, crunch.
Crunch, crunch, yeah.
You're not very quiet when you're walking in the woods this time of year. So every animal for miles around hears you coming.
So if someone wanted to do some training with you, is it like a half-day training? Is it a full-day training? Do you have longer periods of time if someone wanted to travel out to California or up to you're in Northern California, I think.
Northern California.
California. Drive up.
I'm up near Eureka area, so quite a ways north. And I can customize for whatever your needs are if you wanted to do a tracking training. And so, if you're going to be in the area and you want to just go trailing for half a day, or you want to just go looking at tracks and signs and learn some of the basics on one of the local river bars or something, that would be perfectly fine. I can customize for anything. There's also the entire CyberTracker program if you're interested in the evaluation process. And you could take one of the lower band evaluations, which is a lot easier than the specialist level ones. And there's a website called trackercertification.com where you can find out information about that.
Okay.
And they offer those all over. So if you're not able to travel to Northwestern California, there may be a CyberTracker evaluation in your area, or if you have a bunch of people that you want to train or get trained on this, you could sign up. If you get 10 people together, you could sign up to host one of these evaluations also.
Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to travel here. Those are offered all over, and even they've even got it in other countries. There's a group in Spain and a group in the Netherlands, and the South Africa is really big. There was an evaluation in Mexico. They've been in Canada, so they're all over the place. And the evaluator.
What does something like that cost?
It's a set rate, and I don't remember what it cost for the standard evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be $1,500 for 10 people, but I think the specialist evaluation is $3,500 for 10 people. So you you basically pass that cost on to the participants that each pay
right.
$350.
Okay.
And
That's
that
not
may
bad,
have changed,
actually.
but
That's not a
it's
bad
not
price.
bad
No.
for a 2-day training with the best evaluators in the world. I mean, the evaluators they have for CyberTracker are all senior trackers, which means they have scored 100% on their uh, specialist certificates, and they've done trailing. They've gotten 100% in that, and so they're very, very skilled people. And I recommend all of them. They're really nice. They're easy to work with. They'll explain everything to you. And so in a way, it's not really so much just an evaluation, but it's also a class,
Right.
Especially the lower band ones, because they take the time to explain every question, and they don't move on to the next one until everybody's satisfied they've had their questions answered. So it's a superb learning experience. If you're into tracking at all, I can't recommend it enough. It's probably the best bang for your buck you're going to get for tracking anywhere.
That's amazing.
Go to one of these evaluations. Yeah.
Well, Kim, this has been, I know it's for some of our readers, we're more in us urban environments. This is definitely out of the realm, but I want our listeners to really think about this, because part of this whole tracking, sometimes you have to get out of your habitat to learn something new that you bring back into your habitat. So I would suggest that if you have, especially those of you who hunt recreationally or go out into the woods recreationally, you might benefit from this sort of training, because it will probably help illuminate you in a different way of understanding what you're seeing. And so you might want to check it out, and certainly check out Kim's website. So why don't we close here? Give people your rundown on how to get to your website. You've listed several of them on Facebook, and so why don't you rattle that off again, and then don't forget to send that to me in an email so we can include it, but just give it one more time for our audience, and then I'll wrap us up.
Okay, so my website is BearTracker.com. So don't spell out the dash, just put a dash in there.
Yeah.
And that's about animal tracks and sign. It's called BearTracker's Animal Tracks Den. And on YouTube, BearTracker 777. And I have instructional videos on how to identify tracks and sign from various species there. There's a Facebook group called Animals Don't Cover Their Tracks, which I run. And also, if you're into highly detailed discussions about tracks and sign, CyberTracker Specialist Study Buddies group on Facebook is another place to look. And if you are interested in an evaluation from CyberTracker, it would be trackercertification.com. And there's ways to contact all the evaluators there. If there's not one in your area, a lot of times they will travel.
Well, thank you very much, Kim, for stopping by and talking about some of your experience. And so I think this is a skill set that we need to develop more in our work as pest control operators. So thank you very much. All right, everybody, we're wrapping it up here. Again, I'm Stephen Vantassel, wildlife control consultant. I want to thank you for joining us here. Don't forget to take some time and subscribe to our channel. If you have criticisms, comments about the show, comments for future shows, definitely reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. That's wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. And remember, we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. So be careful out there.